What is going on, everybody? We're live. Just going to go ahead and just give a minute or so for everyone to go ahead and join the stream. This is the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show. I'm your host, Sean Stevenson. Again, just going to give just about 30 seconds. Go ahead and share out the streams on all your social media platforms. Want to thank you guys again for coming. It's going to be another great show. Just going to go ahead and share this out one last time before we go ahead and hop straight into it. If you guys are watching, go ahead and let me know how you're doing this Sunday morning as the Cleveland Browns go ahead and travel to Jacksonville to take on the Jaguars for Week 12. The Browns are looking good so far this season. And we're going to go ahead and hop straight into it. Again, I want to thank you guys so much for coming to the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show. It's going to be another good one. The Cleveland Browns are currently 7-3. Again, my name is Sean Stevenson. I am the host of the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show, which is brought to you by Sports Illustrated BrownsDigest. I am a contributing writer for Sports Illustrated BrownsDigest, along with lead editor Pete Smith and contributing writer Brandon Little. This week, I will actually have a guest on the show all the way from Ireland. He'll be coming in a little bit later into the show. I have to go ahead and get into this intro. So again, let's hop straight into it. Again, the Cleveland Browns are facing off against the Jacksonville Jaguars today at TIA Bank Field in Jacksonville. The last time these two teams met up, the Jaguars did win 19-7 back in Week 11 of the 2017 season. We all know how that season went. So let's go ahead and talk about this season. The Cleveland Browns currently sitting at 7-3, are second in the AFC North, and are in the thick of the playoff hunt. Currently looking at the offense, the Browns are definitely a run-first team, as you guys all know. They currently have the third best rushing attack in the NFL, but obviously have the best 1-2 punch in Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Nick Chubb, returning from injury reserve a couple weeks ago, has provided a great boost to this team and this offense. Offense overall that has struggled to put up a lot of yards through the air or just even posting receiving touchdowns. Currently, the Browns have the second worst passing attack in terms of yardage in the NFL, but they do throw the ball at a more efficient rate than teams that are on the lower end of the spectrum in terms of passing yards. They're actually 21st in the league in terms of efficiency rate when they are throwing the ball. Then on the flip side, on the defense, the Browns do have a top 10 run defense unit, only allowing 4 yards per carry. Obviously something that they want to improve on a weekly basis. And then looking at that secondary, a group that is going to be undermanned this week with some injuries on the back end. They're currently the 18th ranked, so right middle of the road in terms of passing yards allowed. And then some news for this week's game. Browns Chief of Staff, Kaylee Brownson, will actually be handing tight ends coach Drew Petzing's game day responsibilities, which is huge because she will actually be the first NFL coach, positional coach in NFL history to basically have game day responsibilities, which is huge. Again, the Browns with Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry have always talked about inclusion and diversity within their coaching staff and those that are around the players and the personnel. And again, Kelly Brownson, which is another player that the Browns put in a significant position in order to help this Browns team win. And basically, new to this season, per NFL policy, clubs are required to announce when a member of the coaching staff misses a game for any reason. And in this case, Coach Petzing actually is going to be missing the game because of him and his wife having their firstborn child Saturday morning. So obviously he didn't make the trip down to Jacksonville as he's with family, which is very understandable. And then also the club must announce the name and the new responsibility assumed by any coach, in this case, coach or chief of staff Brownson, who has had his or her normal game day responsibilities and just in such an absence. Now, looking at the Browns, we all know that they're in the thick of the playoff race. So it's important on a weekly basis for you guys to follow who the Browns, essentially who you want to root for the Browns in order to win, to help their playoff chances. Now, these two games are obviously the most important that have the biggest impact on the Browns. Obviously, if they win this game against Jacksonville, which I highly do believe they will, you look at the Titans, who are currently the 5th seed, and then the Colts, who are the 4th seed. You would actually want to root for the Titans to win this game. One, because this will move the Browns to the 5th seed. Whoever loses that game, they're obviously going to drop down to the 6th seed, having the same record as the Browns in the situation that they win. And the reason why you want to be voting for the Titans to win this week and rooting for them is because when you look at the Colts and their defense and their overall team, they have the second highest rated defense in the NFL. And in the situation that the Browns do end up becoming the 5th seed based off of other teams that are behind them in the playoff race, I don't think that the Browns want to necessarily see a top 2 defense for a team that's been struggling to throw the ball over the last 3 weeks. And we don't know when the offensive passing game is going to pick back up and, obviously perform at a higher level. So in that situation, you would definitely want the Browns to either be facing off against the Tennessee Titans or the Buffalo Bills. In that situation, you either want the Browns to be a 5th or 6th seed. And then again, with the Bills or the Titans at 3 and 4, because obviously the Kansas City Chiefs will be an extremely tough matchup for your first game in the playoffs. And then also you want to be voting for the Chargers to beat the Bills in the situation that the Colts do win, because that would cause the Bills to move down to the 4th seed and again give the Browns a more favorable matchup in terms of the playoffs. And then, of course, the big game from Thanksgiving that was moved to Sunday, then moved again to Tuesday for a nationally televised game is the Baltimore Ravens versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, you want the Steelers to win that game. I know some of you want the Browns to have an opportunity to win the AFC North, but in this situation, it's going to be highly unlikely that they catch up to the Steelers just because of, one, what the Steelers have on the remaining schedule and not too many good teams left on that schedule outside of essentially the Browns and the Baltimore Ravens. So in that situation, you want the Pittsburgh Steelers to get another victory. I know it's very tough for a lot of you Browns fans to be rooting for the Pittsburgh Steelers on game day, but obviously that's something that you want to do because that would bring the Ravens down to a record of 6 and 5. And Lamar Jackson, he's already dealing with COVID. He's been struggling throwing the ball already. The receiving weapons aren't that great this year. So obviously keeping the Ravens out of the playoff picture is another good thing for the Browns. And again, you will want to see the Steelers win this week, with the Chargers beating the Bills if the Colts win. Now, looking at the injury report for the Browns, this is obviously huge for them because obviously we're missing a lot of players. You look at the fact that they're missing their 2-star players on the defense in Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward. Denzel Ward will be out this week while he deals with a calf injury, and this is likely something that will keep him out multiple games. You look at Wyatt Teller, that he missed a few games in a row while dealing with a calf strain. They did say that Denzel Ward is dealing with a similar injury. So, it's going to be a timetable of a couple weeks of when he'll be likely to return. Also, free safety Sheldrick Redwine, he will be out with a knee injury that he suffered earlier in the week, something he's been dealing with for a while. So obviously you want him to get back healthy in a situation that Andrew Sendejo, who's also listed as questionable with a groin injury this week, if he's to miss any extended period of time, you obviously want extra safeties on the roster. So with this week, likely we are to expect a starting duo of Ronnie Harrison Jr. and Carl Joseph at their safety spots, most likely with Harrison at that free safety slot that Andrew Sendejo does usually man. He obviously is one of those players that have played most snaps on defense this season, but it's been with mixed results with Andrew Sendejo. So it'll be interesting to see if he goes today, maybe a game time decision suffering from that groin injury. And then lastly, Wyatt Teller, again, he's been dealing with that calf injury for weeks now, even before the bye, having to get filled in by Chris Hubbard. He's listed as questionable, but again, likely to go this week. And then you look at the reserve COVID-19 list. This was something that was huge for the Browns this week. The number of players that have been impacted by COVID-19 with positive tests. Obviously, they want to try to get these players back as quickly as possible. They're already missing 3 defensive linemen this week due to the COVID-19 reserve list. You look at Myles Garrett, who's missing his 2nd straight game after positive tests and symptoms from COVID-19. You obviously hope that he can get healthy. This is going to be a huge, huge matchup for the Browns, and not in terms because of just the competition within the Jacksonville Jaguars, just because the Browns are making a playoff run, and obviously the more games that you can win against teams that you should beat, increase your chances of getting to the playoffs. Look at the fact that next week they'll be going against the Tennessee Titans, followed up by the Baltimore Ravens. Taking a win here and carrying momentum into those 2 games are essential in terms of keeping momentum into making a playoff push towards the end of the season. And obviously you would like to get Myles Garrett back next week against the Titans or potentially against the Baltimore Ravens, which would be good for them. But again, it all depends on the health and the positive test and any potential symptoms of Myles Garrett. If he's able to pass, a test potentially early in the week around Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, and he's not showing any symptoms of COVID-19, there could be a stronger possibility that he's able to play next week, but that's something we really only can play by ear depending on what head coach Kevin Stefanski gives us. And it's actually a good thing that the Browns are continuing to follow the NFL protocol when it comes down to COVID-19, just because we all know the severity of this pandemic and what the Browns are trying to change, and the NFL is trying to keep players safe. Also looking at the reserve COVID list, you look at fullback Andy Janovich, who's also missing, defensive end Joe Jackson, linebacker Sione Takitaki, and then defensive end Porter Gustin. So again, missing a lot of players along that defensive line for the Browns. So you hope that they can get these players back as soon as possible. They did activate a couple players from the practice squad along the defensive line in order to help cover some of those players that will be missing due to the reserve list. And then, of course, Andy Stanton, a player that they had signed in the offseason, he was promoted from the practice squad to be that fullback with Andy Janovich still on that reserve COVID-19 list. Now, looking at the Jacksonville Jaguars, looking at their injury report, they will be out their 2 starting receivers in DJ Chark, who is dealing with a rib injury, and then also receiver Chris Conley, who's dealing with a hip injury. He'll be out as well this week. And then also they're missing another player along their offense with a group that hasn't been the best in the first place, missing out on left guard Andrew Norwell. He's dealing with a forearm injury, so he'll be out this week. And then also missing another corner in Sidney Jones, who's suffering from Achilles injury. He was out. And then lastly, running back Dare Ogunbowale. He's dealing with a hand injury, and he's listed as questionable, most likely going to be a game-time decision. Again, I want to thank you guys for joining me on the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show. The Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show is sponsored by Focus Clothing CLE. Focus Clothing is a Cleveland-based clothing apparel company, small Black-owned business in Ohio. Be sure to check them out at focusclothingcle.com. And they also have some great holiday sales going on. Focus Clothing is the great holiday gift for you or for a loved one. And be sure to check them out.
Said that t-shirt was only for the summer.
And that is Focus Clothing CLE. Make sure you guys go ahead and get them follow on Instagram and Facebook. And then just quickly, before we go ahead and introduce our special guest, just going to go over the depth chart for the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. Obviously, a big change for them. Mike Glennon is going to be stepping into the starting lineup, replacing Jake Luton, who has started the last 3 games for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Starting running back will be James Robinson, basically the best player that's been on this Jacksonville offense, undrafted free agent that's been playing very well for this team. Obviously, after them cutting Leonard Fournette, a lot of teams were expecting him to be struggling in the run game, but they're actually been able to find some success with James Robinson in the backfield. At receiver, missing 2 of their starting receivers, you will see Laviska Shenault, Keelan Cole, and then likely a mixture of Colin Johnson and Dede Westbrook. Moving over to the tight end position, expect James O'Shaughnessy to be in 12 personnel, and then also to be their starting tight end, backed up by Tyler Eifert. Looking at their offensive line, you do have Cam Robinson, former Alabama player. Tyler Shatley will be moving over to left guard to replace Andrew Norwell. Center Brandon Linder, who's been their best player so far along the offensive line. He actually is the highest rated center at passing, according to Pro Football Focus, with the 87.3 pass blocking grade. So that's actually good for them in terms of having protection in the interior. And then next to him, you have A.J. Kane. And then to flank him out at the right tackle position is Juwan Taylor. Looking at their defense, a group that has also been missing players a lot to IR and to injury. You will have Kavlon Chason, the rookie that they drafted this year from LSU. He'll be replacing Josh Allen, who was just recently placed on IR this week. And then flanking him will be Adam Gostis at the other defensive end position. Looking at the interior of the defensive line, you do have Taven Bryant and Devon Hamilton. Looking at their linebacking group, a group that will have a familiar name in middle linebacker Joe Schobert. This is his first game against Cleveland since leaving for free agency this year. And then also you have a very talented weak side linebacker, Miles Jack. And then they have a little bit of change with Kamale Correa at that strong side linebacker position. And then lastly, at their secondary, they're missing again multiple players along that back four, the third level of that secondary. CJ Henderson and DJ Hedden, their starting two corners, were both placed on IR this week. So you expect Trey Herndon to be that quarterback number one. And then they have two rookies in Luke Barku and Josiah Scott that will likely be coming in with the most reps this week in the secondary. And then also you have strong safety Andrew Wingard, who's stepping in for the injured Josh Jones, who's just placed on our IR over the last 2 weeks as well. And then Gerard Wilson, who will be the starting free safety this week. So obviously there's going to be a lot of players that the Jacksonville Jaguars are missing in terms of their secondary and even their best pass rushers. So this may be a great opportunity for Baker Mayfield to finally step in and to have a big game through the air. Obviously, the Browns defense are missing some star players, so Kevin Stefanski will likely lean on his offense to really get the game going. So let me go ahead and introduce you guys to the special guest for this week, all the way from Ireland, the man that actually gave me an opportunity to join him on his podcast earlier this year when I was just first getting my name started in the Browns Twitter community. On Twitter, he's known as Two Green Browns. He's also a host of a podcast with the Cleveland Sports Collective. I would like to introduce you guys to my guest, Neil from Two Green Browns. How you doing, Neil?
Hey, Sean, how are you?
Good. I would like to thank you so much for joining me on the show. So just quickly, would you like to just tell people about yourself and, what you do in terms of your content with the Cleveland Browns?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Sean mentioned there, you'll find me at Two Green Browns on Twitter. Basically, Ireland can be a lonely place for a Cleveland Browns fan. And there's a couple of us here that decided to group together and maybe try and get some basically just try and raise the profile of Cleveland Browns here in Ireland. And my good buddy John Cahill as well, we decided we'd create a podcast originally called Two Green Browns to just basically try and get the name out there for people. The Cleveland Browns, NFL and American football in general is becoming huge here in Ireland. There's a college game is played in Ireland every year. Well, not this year. It's called the Aer Lingus Classic, and it's becoming more and more popular and prevalent. And a lot of pubs are showing NFL over here. And it's predominantly a Patriots country, Boston and Ireland connection. And I've never been one to go with the flow, especially not with those cheating Patriots. But but so I picked the Cleveland Browns mainly because I'm an Aston Villa fan, and Randy Lerner had taken over Aston Villa in 2005, and that's really when I became a huge Cleveland Browns fan. Luckily, I'm living in a place here called Galway in Ireland, and we are the only Cleveland Browns backers in Ireland at the moment. A wonderful gentleman called Ed Davis from originally from Maslin in Ohio. He is a lifelong Cleveland Browns fan. He's living here, and he set up Cleveland Browns supporters group. And I just happened to find it 2 days after he set it up, and it's gone from strength to strength there. And we have about 10 people, and we meet up usually every Sunday to watch the games pre-COVID. And it's just been fantastic to have other Cleveland Browns fans here. So it's, I love my Browns, and I love Sundays come 6 o'clock our time, 1 o'clock your time.
Yeah, it's really nice when you can just watch your game and then end up just going to sleep after watching some games in Europe. That was definitely something that I had to do when I was studying abroad in Denmark. Those Monday night games are tough when you got to be up at 3, 4 in the morning just to catch a game. So,
absolutely.
So go ahead and get into our first topic of the show. Go ahead and click that really quickly. So obviously one of the huge things for the Browns this week is the fact that they're missing 3 defensive ends due to COVID-19 or the reserve list. You look at the fact that they're already missing Myles Garrett. They're also going to be missing Joe Jackson, a rotational defensive end, and then Porter Gustin, a player that they really relied on after Myles Garrett went down with, an injury. And then, of course, when he went on COVID reserve, they looked for him to come in and provide starter reps. So this week, you're likely looking at, Olivier Vernon and Adrian Claiborne being those 2 starting defensive ends. Do you believe that Olivier Vernon can anchor the defensive line and provide performances that he's been giving over the last few weeks?
I think we're in a very favorable position that this front office has put us in, because when we look at the difference from last year to this year, when with Brian Cox Jr. and I can't even remember who the other defensive end. I think it might have been Porter Gustin, and there was some other person in there, but easily known that we've, that they haven't stuck around apart from Porter Gustin. But when you look at the guys that we have to play here, even though we do have Porter Gustin, Myles Garrett, and you mentioned Joe Jackson out, having veterans like Claiborne and Vernon in there is really, really important. Those middlemen, those guys that are in there that have leadership capabilities. And you mentioned Olivier Vernon specifically there. Throughout his career, he's been known as a really intelligent player, a really intelligent guy, a guy in good standing, doesn't make many bad mistakes. And that is pivotal for this team, to have that older head, to have that elder statesman in there. We saw what he could do when the spotlight was put on him last week. And I'm hoping that we can really see that again this week against a pretty beat up Jacksonville offensive line as well. Joe Woods put it best, I think, when we talk about Olivier Vernon. Joe Woods put it best during the week when he said, "We've seen you do it last week. We expect you to do it every week now." And I think he does have the stuff to do it. When we look back at his time with the Giants, and especially his time in Miami as well, he was a pass rusher, a pure pass rusher. Maybe it didn't really work out for him when he had to stand up and he was in a 3-4. But since he's been here, he's been a very, very solid player. When his name has been called to rush the passer, he showed that he could do it last week. He's very stout against the run also, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he brings today.
Yeah, I definitely believe that he's a player that takes advantage of different opportunities. You look at early in the season, there were some questions about, when is he going to, provide some sacks and generate some consistent pressure in terms of, getting after the quarterback. Because I would say during his tenure in Cleveland, he never really matched up to that pass rushing production that he had during the time when he was on the Giants. You look at up to the point that he joined the Browns, he averaged 6.5 sacks a season since I believe it was like 2014. And we were expecting finally that consistent defensive end across from Myles Garrett to get after the quarterback. You look at the fact that they allowed, what's his name? He's having a great season for the Miami Dolphins right now. Emmanuel Ogbah. They allowed him to basically walk after signing Olivier Vernon because he just wasn't providing that pass rushing potential that we need on the opposite side. And I feel like we got kind of a redundant player in terms of Olivier Vernon because he was that defensive end that was great in run support, but just wasn't providing a lot in terms of pass rush. And then just over the last few weeks after the bye, he's just given so much to the defensive line and able to generate pressures. You look at the fact that he's had a 2-sack and a 3-sack game over the last 3 matchups, and that's been huge, especially with the fact that they're missing Myles Garrett.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is, as I say, it's a lot of the how am I going to put this? A lot of the reason that a lot of people dislike certain players, I won't say dislike because that's a pretty silly word for this, but a lot of the reason that they expect more from players is because of a price tag. And that's a fair point. When you're dealing with a league that has got a salary cap, it is a fair point. I know we can come in the counterpoint and say that, yes, it's not my money that they're paying him, and that is fine. But it's the point of view that that if somebody is getting paid that amount of money, you expect to see production from them. I think a lot of the schemes that Vernon have been in, he's been a bit more of the big dog. Obviously, when you come into a scheme with Myles Garrett, you're kind of expected to eat second. You don't get to the plate first because Myles Garrett is who he is. But when his number, as I say, it can't be understated that his leadership qualities and the number that when his number has been called since Myles Garrett has been out this year, he has shown up to the table, and we hope that we see it again today. So I'm just delighted to have him. Look, he's an old head for the long road. We're in the business side of the games now. We need to win this game today. We need to win against the Titans. It'd be great to win out from here on in and see where we go. But if we're serious about getting to the playoffs and not just serious about getting a season above 500, guys like Olivier Vernon and guys like Adrian Claiborne are going to be pivotal to this.
Definitely. I fully agree with you. And then hopefully, if in a situation that he is moved up in terms of the rotation for any reason, hopefully it's not injury or anything like that. If Calvin Malvo, the defensive end that they promoted from the practice squad, if he has any significant snaps, hopefully that he can provide some consistency and really just hold his own. That's really what you want to see from players that are unproven. He did play 9 snaps last week, so obviously he's going to be in that rotation, not having Porter Gustin or Joe Jackson. So Cameron Malvo will be another player that you want to look out for, especially in terms of run defense, something that I feel like he was kind of just a step behind a little bit last week in terms of, playing the run, but stepping in the NFL, not having significant experience, one of the biggest things that you want to look for, just a player just understanding the speed and understanding what their responsibilities are whenever they're onto the field. So looking at the secondary, this is, again, another group that is missing some players. You look at the fact that they're missing Denzel Ward, who's been arguably the best player and obviously the second best player on this defense behind Myles Garrett, who I believe should still be in the Defensive Player of the Year running, granted that he can get healthy and get back on the field. Do you believe that someone, or who do you think will step up in the secondary? It looks like we lost them for a second. I'll go ahead and wait for him to get back on here. But I would just like, again, thank you guys for joining me on the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show. One of the things I actually wanted to talk about, as we wait for Neil to get back, was the Detroit Lions and the firing of general manager Bob Quinn and head coach Matt Patricia. A big thing about that is Jim Caldwell was the last coach or last winning coach that was with the Lions that was fired prior to them adding Matt Patricia to that coaching staff. You look at the fact that Jim Schwartz didn't perform relatively well with the Detroit Lions. And then you look at Matt Patricia also failing. And it just seemed like it was about time for the Lions to clean house. You could tell that Matt Patricia was another former Bill Belichick disciple that just never really worked out. You look at the fact that Josh McDaniels, his term as a head coach with the Denver Broncos was kind of a mismatch in terms of just, performance. And then you look at Bill O'Brien recently getting fired, another former disciple of Bill Belichick. You look at Matt Patricia, again, another person that came under that Bill Belichick line. And then you kind of see, Mike Vrabel. Now, even though he was a player and not a direct coach under Bill Belichick, he's one of the few coaches that's having success after coming from the Patriots. And then you also look at Brian Flores, the coach of the Miami Dolphins, as one of the few coaches that's having success with him. And now it's really starting to question, how much impact has Bill Belichick really made on the success of the Patriots? Obviously, you do have they did have Tom Brady, who's the greatest quarterback of all time, and that definitely helps with the success that the team has. But it really shows the importance of having the right coaching system in place in order to have some success in the NFL. And looks like we got Neil back to the string, so go ahead and add them on there. And I was just talking about the fact that the Detroit Lions fired Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn the other day. And actually, what are your thoughts on it? Because I believe the Browns are extremely lucky to have a very young and smart coach in Kevin Stefanski running at the helm.
Yeah, firstly, apologies for the loss of contact there. We've thunderstorms here in Ireland, and our internet infrastructure wouldn't be the best here, as that's how I'm going to put it. But I'm Matt Patricia. As you can see, I'm in homage to Matt Patricia today with my scraggly unkept beard, my big jowly face, and my hat on backwards. But Matt Patricia, in my view, is a very good defensive mind. He was very good with Bill Belichick, as I think I heard you mentioning there. It is the curse of the Belichick disciple. Stepped up to being a head coach. Didn't really come off for him. Rubbed up the media a small bit the wrong way in Detroit as well. There was a small bit at the time. It's really interesting because I remember when the Browns were hiring Hugh Jackson, Matt Patricia was really, really in the fold for that. He was very much in the fold for us then. And maybe it goes to show the kind of person that we were looking for back then. Obviously, Hugh Jackson didn't pan out for us. We don't really need to go over eating bread and that one. Matt Patricia hasn't worked out in Detroit either, but both of them kind of fell on their sword in the same ways of being kind of stubborn in the way they wanted to play, wanting to run it with their way and not being open to any other suggestions. And also, they both at times maybe kind of weren't as forthcoming with the media, or maybe let their frustrations get ahead of them. So it's really interesting. I think there's a strange dichotomy between those two people. But Matt Patricia is a really, really good defensive coordinator. He was in New England as well. And I'm sure he's going to cotton on somewhere in the league. He's going to catch on somewhere as a defensive coordinator, but maybe the head coach was a bit much for him. Personally, myself, I think it was probably a year too late when he got his marching orders. You could kind of see it unraveling at the end of last season. And look, if somebody needs a defensive coordinator next year, you're going to have Matt Patricia, you're going to have Dan Quinn out there, you're going to have guys, really, really experienced coaches out there from the defensive side of the ball. And I'm sure that they're going to get a gig somewhere else again. But looking at it from our point of view, our stability is fantastic. For the first time for the first time in a long time, we're going into the season, or we will be going into next season with nobody calling for our coach's head. Even when we have kept our coach for the season, for 2 or 3 seasons, there's always been a good chorus of dissension somewhere from the fan base or from the media and so on. But I think that, we can only talk very highly of Kevin Stefanski. He's very level-headed. He won't come out and lash back at people in press conferences. He's not going to throw his players under buses. He's not going to pull out Baker Mayfield just willy-nilly just to prove a point and so on. He's very level-headed. He's got good people around him. Bill Callahan, Thanksgiving for you guys during the week, I wrote up on Twitter, I'm thankful for Bill Callahan because the difference between our O-line is night and day. And I think that stability is something that's really going to allow this team to grow.
Definitely. And it's extremely nice to finally be a team or a year where the Browns aren't talking about what head coach or what draft status they're going to be looking for, week 12, week 13 into the season. So getting back into the topic that we were just previously talking about, looking at the secondary, I believe a player that can step up or really needs to step up this week and have a huge game is Kevin Johnson. I feel like when he finally made it to the lineup, obviously he did provide some, improved play in the slot in terms of Tavier Thomas, a player that kind of you could tell that he wasn't extremely suited to be playing full time in the slot at the nickel position. But obviously, when you have players that are on injured reserve or you're just waiting for someone to get healthy again, you need other players to step up. He did a serviceable job. Obviously, the Browns did go on a 4-game winning streak with him at the helm before Kevin Johnson was able to play full time. And he's likely going to step in this week at nickel and play significant snaps. I really don't see them leaning too much on MJ Stewart at all. He hasn't really played much at all this season, and he's probably just a player that I feel like has kind of fell out of favor with the coaching staff, and he's only coming on the team on a 1-year deal, so you're not really missing too much if he doesn't play. So I expect Tavier Thomas to be that nickel corner again, but you need Kevin Johnson to really be that solid number 2 that you're looking for. Obviously, you're probably going to go into this matchup having Terrence Mitchell cover whoever the number 1 receiver is, most likely Laviska Shenault, and you feel confident with the performance that Terrence Mitchell has played with so far, playing almost every snap in the secondary, having the most snaps at corner. You expect him to be that savvy veteran that he's been, provide solid coverage, and really just be able to contest catches at the high point that he's done throughout the season. Now with Kevin Johnson, I feel like he's had mixed performances. He'll either play really good in the slot, and then other times he's allowing players to run free in man coverage or, just not being in the right spot in terms of zone or making plays on the ball. So hopefully this week he can kind of turn that tide, because I feel over the last few weeks and slightly before the bye week, he was kind of always a step behind a little bit and not making those plays that we needed from him. And if he really wants to be part of the future of this team, because obviously, this isn't really a rebuild. It was just a restructure to finally get the right pieces in place. And if he wants to be part of his team long term, he's going to have to flip the script a little bit in these last few games as we make a playoff push.
I think there's one name, and I'll probably go. You're probably going to get pelters for this on Twitter. Well, I am, and you are. But there's a name on that list that's been ever present for the Browns, whether he's whether you like him or whether you don't, he's not everybody's poison. But Andrew Sandeo isn't there either as well. And I think that when we look at maybe, I think it's inevitable that Kevin Johnson moves out onto the boundary. I think it's inevitable that happens. And to kind of mitigate the loss that we have inside, like I'm not really sure about Tavier Thomas. He has been poor when he's been asked to cover. Very good tackler in special teams. I think that we'll see some packages where maybe Ronnie Harrison steps into that slot, or maybe Carl Joseph steps in there, or even Sandeo himself. We've got 3 strong safeties, but I think that they'll step in there. Ronnie Harrison can run with tight ends. I wouldn't mind seeing him step in there. And maybe then you see Tavier Thomas comes on and maybe some blitz packages, because being a good tackler, you would expect him, he would be able to brush off tackles, get to the quarterback and so on, like Denzel Ward did last week. Remember the tapped throw he got to the quarterback. There was
for the pick six with Taki.
Yes, yeah. So if they want to throw that out, what they lose in Denzel Ward, they will gain, I suppose, in Tavier Thomas's endeavor and ability to get to the quarterback from a tackling point of view. But it will be really interesting to see who they're going to put in there. it's kind of a situation. Laviscus Chenault he could line up at running back. We saw it in college when he was coming out. Could line up at running back. Could line up on the perimeter. Could line up in the slot. He really could line up anywhere. So I don't know if you're going to actually have someone that's going to run directly with him, but you could, as I say, in Terrence Mitchell. The other guys that they're going to have in there, Dede Westbrook, I think is just off IR. I think he was activated off IR during the week. So he is obviously a latent speed guy, stretch the field. And they do have Tyler Eifert, who we're very familiar with here in Cleveland as well, coming from his time with the Browns. So this is kind of what I'm getting at here, is the fact that I think that Ronnie Harrison will stand in the slot. I think he'll be there to look after the likes of Tyler Eifert or the Viscous Chenault if he is there. And maybe get someone who can get their hands on him. But I think we'll see a lot of 3 safeties in the field in this game. Also to mitigate our linebacker deficiencies as well, with Taki being out too. I think this is probably the time to maybe try it, see what happens, because their offense is, it could be a bit powder puff today. I'm hoping it will be with all their injuries.
Yeah, definitely. And I believe that this is a good matchup for the Browns to have, just because it's you hate to say that a team sucks in the NFL. I don't want to use that particular vernacular, but
we did.
The Jaguars aren't good. Obviously, they're tanking. They're trying to get the best draft position as possible, and they're basically battling with the New York Jets, the only winless team, for that number 1 overall pick. And it's either going to be Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields, probably 1 and 2 this year in the draft, depending on who comes out. But you want the Browns defense to really step up. I believe it's a good test to not have Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward this week, of any week of the whole schedule, just because this is a team that is already undermanned themselves, and then you have a Browns defensive group of players on 1-year contracts, and you're really trying to figure out who really are the ballers on this defense. Mm-hmm. And when you can have people step up in a matchup like this, it really can help raise that player's stock heading into next season, and figure out, who do you extend? Who do you look at the long term? There are a lot of players on the Browns defense that are looking for contracts. You have Larry Ogunjobi, Carl Joseph, and Sendejo are only on 1-year deals. Terrence Mitchell, obviously Greedy Williams, his health is still questionable. You don't know what corners are going to hit the market and who's really going to be playing well next season. So you look at Terrence Mitchell, Kevin Johnson, potentially, if they're looking to give him a contract extension. There's a lot of players that really have to, make a name for themselves. And there's no better week to do that than when you're playing against a team when your star players are out. So looking at the offense, and we're talking about star players, there's one star player that really hasn't, I don't necessarily want to say he hasn't shown up, because he's definitely shown up, but it really hasn't been too much on the stat sheet. He hasn't had a 100-yard game, I don't believe, so far this season. He's yet to score a touchdown. Mm-hmm. Do you think Jarvis Landry can finally find his way in the end zone against a depleted Jags secondary?
I sincerely hope he does, because if he doesn't do it in this game against the likes of Luke Baroque and what's his name, Trey Herndon, and another, I think is the other guy, some guy off the street. I don't think that he will, So I think he does. Look, he's this Jags defense. They should all be licking their lips, especially somebody as kind of vocal in the locker room as Jarvis Landry. He should be standing up and saying to Baker, I need this. You got to give it to me. You got to make sure that I get a lot of ball here. I'm going to be crossing over the middle. I'm going to be trying to take stuff in the flat. Just give me everything. Do all the trick plays that we need as well. Let him throw the ball, whatever. But the main thing for him is that he gets his yards up today and that he gets into the end zone at some stage, because we're going to need Jarvis Landry in the run-in. Like, I'm talking about us as a playoff team at the moment. And I think Pete said it best on Locked On Browns, that we're going to need to see these players step up. We're going to need to see them today as a kind of dress rehearsal. I fully expect us to win this game. And we need to win this game if we're serious. This is a dress rehearsal. Next week is the main performance. And then we're going to have 2 more encores after that with the Ravens and the Steelers. So we can't afford not to try the things that we want to play against the bigger teams on a day like today. Get it right. practices are few and far between. They're slim. I have no problem with forcing the ball to somebody like Jarvis Landry today. If we get up maybe by 10 points early, force the ball to Jarvis Landry, see what we can get from him, get him in a rhythm, because like him or not, he is somebody we're going to need to call his name throughout the course of the playoffs. When we've got third downs, when we're in second and short, third and short, we're going to look for him just to move those chains. And getting him confident is something that's very important. And I think today he probably has in his mindset that 1 touchdown, 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns. I think he'll smell blood in the water early on today, and I hope that Jarvis can really light it up.
Yeah, if Baker Mayfield is able to really reestablish that, great connection with Jarvis Landry that he's shown really last season, and then I would say a little bit early parts of this season, it can really help this Browns passing offense, get its footing back. Yes. You look at the last 3 weeks, there really hasn't been a lot of production in the air. Obviously, when you have Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, you don't have to worry about throwing the ball too much because you're running the ball with success and you're able to move drives with just running the ball. But hopefully, Jarvis Landry can – I feel Jarvis Landry is that player that can help boost the confidence of Baker Mayfield in terms of throwing the ball. He has a connection, obviously, with Rashard Higgins. There's been some weeks that they've been able to make some big plays down the field. I feel like Kadero Hodge and Donovan Peoples-Jones is kind of like that weird kind of X-factor player because you don't know how they're going to be involved in the game plan. You look at a few weeks or pretty much 4 or 5 weeks ago when they played against the Cincinnati Bengals, Donovan Peoples-Jones is thrust into, game time action, and he has the game-winning touchdown. The following week, he barely plays. The week after, he gets more playing time than Kadero Hodge. And then last week, Kadero Hodge is our leading receiver. So it's really tough to manage, who's going to be that player for the Browns, especially if you're a fantasy player looking to take advantage of a Browns receiver. But Jarvis Landry, he has to find the end zone towards the end of the season just because, one, those are points. You look at the Raiders game where he had the touchdown that was called back because he didn't have full possession of the ball. Just small plays like that really make a difference in changing the tide of a game. And, he's really been that player that has the most sure hands on this team. Rashard Higgins has very consistent hands himself, but Jarvis Landry is just that player. One, we have such a high price tag, something you mentioned earlier in the show. It's very important that a player plays up to that price tag. You can't be in the top 10 of NFL receivers and not have a touchdown, 12 weeks into the season. So it's really huge for him to get in the end zone this week. And then, so one of the things that, again, is going to be huge for this defense is will they be able to continue to generate pressure without Myles Garrett, and rather that be from their front four or from design pressure from Joe Woods. And that's actually one of the things that's going to be big for me this week is to generate pressure from Joe Woods, rather that's sending players from the slot. You've seen him send Denzel Ward. He's sent Kevin Johnson numerous times. Now, actually a player that I actually said I don't believe is going to play much this week is MJ Stewart. He's actually early in the season, he had the highest blitz rate success of any defensive back by the Browns when being blitzed from the slot. So, if he does decide to have some of those design pressures, maybe MJ Stewart could come into the game and provide an impact that way.
Yeah, and I think it kind of speaks volumes really when they have elevated. Obviously, we mentioned Cameron Malveaux and Joy Ivy have been elevated, and I think what we'll see is a lot of shuffling around of the defensive line. We might see Sheldon go out to defensive end. Obviously, he's played there before. He's more than comfortable to do that. A nice bull rush from Sheldon. I think there's a lot of right tackles out there that wouldn't fancy that 300 pounds of a man putting all his force in them. Also, I think that we might see, and this is something that I went back and I listened to Joe Woods, and Joe Woods, when he first was named as, actually it was interesting because that's when I got you on our podcast, I think, first was to discuss about Joe Woods' the defensive scheme. But Joe Woods obviously came from a three-man front scheme. That's his bread and butter. It had been previously. And I have a funny feeling we're going to see some strange three-man fronts, maybe somebody dropping back. As I said, Olivia Vernon can drop back into that outside linebacker. We might see something like that, especially if they go run heavy up front. We might see that we might just get the big boys in, maybe get in Vince Taylor, get in Ogunjobi, and go with the grunt up front to stop the run. If they realize that Mike Glennon can't throw early on, they just try and bombard us with James Robinson. We could go with that, but to generate pressure, there. I think we're going to see people shuffle around the line. As I mentioned before, we'll see blitzes from the slot. I think Tavier Thomas will be important there, as you mentioned, MJ Stewart. And I would say as well, there could be something for Sendejo. I've got, I don't know what it is. I just have a funny feeling about Sendejo today that he's actually going to do something good, and he's going to have to do something good at some stage. But I think he's going to do something good today, and I think it could be a sack. I think it could be maybe an interception or something, or it could be a last-ditch tackle. But I don't know what it is. I woke up this morning with a feeling that Sendejo was finally going to come to the party today, so it could be something there. But it is going to be really interesting, as you say, and I'm really going to be looking to that front four or front three to see what way they line up, see what gaps they're looking after, and we'll see where that goes, because that's going to be really interesting for us today.
Yeah, hopefully Andrew Sendejo can come in and make some plays. I feel like that's something all Browns fans have been waiting for him to have that big marquee game. I feel like there really hasn't been, I should say, a big positive moment for him since that Cowboys game where he forced the fumble against Zeke Elliott. So let me ask you this. Obviously we're not going to get Grandel Pitt back, and there's probably no one on free agency that you're going to be able to add to really boost his team in such a significant manner like Ronnie Harrison did after that trade with Jacksonville, as he has his revenge game this week. Do you believe that Andrew Sendejo can provide enough consistent play in the playoffs to help the Browns win a playoff game?
I don't know. I don't know. It is something that I have been looking at. Is like I was expecting the Browns to sniff around Pierre Desir at some stage. I think he went in. You think he's gone to the Ravens? I think I read somewhere whereby Ravens were COVID testing him, which was like a day before we found out that Denzel was gone down, which is a bit of a bummer because Pierre Desir could come in, could play outside corner. When you're talking about somebody that come in off the street, I really don't know. Like there's people out there, but a lot of them haven't played and they're older. Andrew Sendejo is no spring chicken. Can he come good in the playoffs? I really, really hope so. He's got tons of experience, and that's what you really have to hope for. That's what you got to pin your hopes on, is the fact that his experience in situations, provided the rest of the team is playing well, that hopefully he will come up with something. But once again, today is the day to try it. Today is the day to see it, and let's try and get him in advantageous situations. Let's try and get him that good game, finally grade out well, finally play mistake free, and see where he goes from there. Because a confident player can at times outplay themselves. So the more confident we get him, the better he should be with all his experience.
Yeah, so hopefully that veteran experience can come in, and really provide some improved play on that third level. Really just my biggest worries with Sendejo so far this season has really been players with speed down the field. It's something that he struggled with. I mean, you've seen it in week one with Hollywood Brown, Willie Snead. I mean, even though Mark Andrews isn't the fastest tight end, but I mean, he's one of the top 5 tight ends in NFL. So he's someone that has always been a problem down the seam for pretty much any team. But, can Sendejo be that player that can come down and just make that play over the top and be that security blanket that really free safeties are supposed to be? Now, when you look at the Jaguars, Mike Glennon, obviously this is his first start in 3 years but it's his first start in 3 years, and you don't know what sort of performance you're going to get from him because he hasn't started the game in so long. Last year with the Arizona Cardinals, he only threw 10 passes. In the last 2 years, he's basically thrown a touchdown in the few times that he's come into the game, but those are always garbage time minutes when teams are really just trying to let the clock run out and not really playing hard defense. And then you also look at the fact that they're missing 2 starters at receiver with DJ Chark and Chris Conley. So how much of the offensive game plan do you believe will involve running back James Robinson?
All of it. I think every single piece of it, I think, is going to involve him. That's a small bit facetious, because I think that they do have players that can hurt us. To take players like Tyler Eifert lightly, and to take players like, as I say, Chenault lightly. There's always a player that will come up trumps in 1 or 2 situations. But James Robinson, he is built out of granite. He is like, what he's done in the league coming in as an undrafted free agent it backs up an awful lot of people's views that you don't draft running backs. But then again, you look at Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb's performance in the league backs up a lot of people's views that you do back running backs. I think really what it is James Robinson he's been their offense an awful lot this year, and with someone coming in there like Mike Glennon's a statue. Like he was when he was with
Chicago,
yeah, and he was with Tampa Bay, if I'm not mistaken. Before that, was it Tampa Bay?
Yeah, right before they actually signed him to a contract. The Bears and their quarterback signings haven't been the best. I mean, you look at Trubisky; he's getting his start this week. He's 3-0, but Nick Foles hasn't really been the best option for them. So,
absolutely not.
Kind of a carousel with the Browns and the Jags in terms of bad quarterback play.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I don't think that they're going to put the ball in Mike Glennon's hands to throw it early on. I think they're going to allow James Robinson to rush and basically call our bluff. Do we pack the box? I don't know how this team is going to look when it brings 8 people up into the box. We've had it against us a couple of times this year with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. I'm actually looking forward to seeing what our team can do when we're in such an obvious situation that we're going to have to bring 8 up. Last time we tried to do it was against the Raiders with Josh Jacobs, and it didn't really work. So what have we learned from that Raiders game? What are we going to install for that game against the team whereby that if they give that ball to Mike Glennon, he's going to hold on to it and he's not going to move out of that pocket. He's going to be a sitting duck for hits, hurries, and tackles. And going back to will Olivier Vernon come up good and can we generate pressure? I'm sure that's something that's on their mind too. But they do have to be mindful of James Robinson, absolutely, because other teams have fallen victim to him and his powerful style of running so far this year.
Yeah, they've been a team that has surprised a lot of teams. You look at the fact that they had a very close matchup with the Green Bay Packers just a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Also, I mean, they gave the Steelers, a little bit of run for their money in the first half. But going to your comment about the Raiders matchup, the thing that I really noticed, now that was a game that I wasn't able to watch in full. I watched bits and pieces of the game because I was traveling at the time. And then, of course, I watched the highlights a few times. And I feel like the Browns' just defensive line kind of just gave up at one point. Once John Gruden was able to run the ball with success, it's very tough for a defense to stop the run once a offense has really asserted their dominance in terms of the trenches. And once they do that in their open up running lane, it gets very difficult. That's something that I believe is going to be important for the Jacksonville Jaguars for them to find success with James Robinson running the ball. But it's also big on the Cleveland Browns defensive line. One, you're already undermanned, which the Jacksonville offense knows. So they're going to be looking to run the ball because that's been their best, way to move the ball at all this season. So really it's going to be about being physical at the line of scrimmage, being able to get off blocks, hold, whatever your gap is and your responsibility on whatever scheme is being called on the defense, and not allowing, too many linemen or tight ends to get to the second level to block those linebackers. Like you stated before, we're already having a deficiency at that linebacking group when it comes to, just players making big plays. Obviously, Sione Takitaki had the first big play of his career last week with the pick 6. But he's more of a player that's suited to stop the run. BJ Goodson, he's been getting better each week. And then Michael Smith is more of a player that's suited to play out in coverage. Mack Wilson, since his return, I don't feel like he's really played well at all this season. It depends on, how some fans feel about him. But I feel like he hasn't really lived up to the expectation that we really wanted from him. Obviously being a starting linebacker, within that rotation. But again, just the linebacking group for the Browns hasn't been the best so far this season. And if you really want to stop Robinson, it all comes down to what you can do in that front 7 and really winning in the trenches and being a more physical team. When you look at a so-called trap game, which I don't believe this is one just because the Jaguars really aren't that good, you really have to be physical up front. And if they're able to do that, I wouldn't be surprised if you see a lot of 3 and outs from the Jaguars. They can't really throw the ball with too much success. Running the ball is very difficult if you're not getting chunk plays running the ball to really move the chains. And if they're able to do that, the defense and their ability to stop the run can really help out this Browns offense, which I feel is the biggest group in question more than the defense is this week.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting you said there about trap games as well, because I don't think this is a trap game for one very, very important reason. I don't think the Jags actually want to win it. I think Doug Marrone wants to win it, yeah, but I don't think that his bosses want to win this game. And you mentioned it at the outset that these guys have stripped it down to the studs. They've really gone the Sashi Brown route, which now seems to be becoming more and more popular.
Right.
To do this, to get what you can get, and then kick the can down the line until your stars align instead of forcing your stars to align. And I think that's very much what this franchise has done. This franchise in the Jaguars, and you mentioned as well that they are, and I think Cleveland knows this as well. That it's going to be very heavily run orientated. That's why they've brought up Joey Ivey. They've brought up people because if they didn't bring them up, there was no way they were going to be able to leave. Against the run, it's debilitating for a defensive line. It's tough. Sometimes people look at them and they go, they don't have to run around that much. Why would they need to come off the field? Why do they get gassed? Sometimes getting hit, it takes more energy out of you to absorb a hit than it does to run around the field, especially if you're 300 pounds. So bringing up Joey Ivey, bringing up Calvin Melvo, and having the guys that are there so that they can at least roll in, roll out, and make sure that we don't have a situation a la like we were under Greg Williams, where Myles Garrett was playing 92% and 100% of snaps, and was just literally out on his feet because he was blitzing every single second of the game. That's not something we want to come across either. And that shows the maturity of this coaching staff, the maturity of this front office, that they understand that yes, we may have an advantage in this game, but we don't want to take anything for chance. We don't want to take anything for chance that James Robinson doesn't knock off 4 touchdowns and 300 yards.
Right. Yeah, definitely with the I feel you on the rotation of the defensive linemen and keeping them fresh, especially from a few years ago. You look at Larry Ogunjobi, who was playing like 90% of the snaps prior to them signing Sheldon Richardson, and then even after that, they were still playing 90% of the snaps, and that's very tough, especially on the interior defensive linemen who are carrying much more weight, defensive ends, because you want to see a little bit of speed if a defensive end needs to drop back in coverage or whatever the case may be. So the addition of Vincent Taylor and Jordan Elliott has been huge for this defense. Vincent Taylor has actually graded a little bit better in terms of his run defense compared to Jordan Elliott. But what Jordan Elliott has been able to provide in terms of his pass rushing prowess in terms of in the interior has been really big. And I definitely believe that's something that they're probably going to rely on, in the near future. I actually wouldn't be surprised if Larry Ogunjobi doesn't get a second contract with the Browns after the season. That's maybe something most people don't want to hear. But, you look at his grading over the last 4 years, it has actually went down since his rookie season. And then also he's just going to be that player that's probably going to be looking for more money after paying out his rookie contract and then only being a 4th round pick. And, maybe Jordan Elliott could be that player to step up.
Absolutely. I think you might get a long-term second contract. I think we might see an awful lot more one-year deals again after this year, with the salary cap being impacted. Players may be a bit reluctant to move to other teams, in the post-COVID atmosphere, because some teams are going to be really hamstrung. I don't know how the Saints and teams like the Saints and other teams out there are going to maneuver the salary cap when it goes down. It's going to be bloodbath for some players. There's going to be players everywhere. But I think what the Browns will do is, I think you could see Larry come back maybe on a 1-year deal, a mutually friendly deal, kind of like Kevin Johnson has this year, maybe 4, 5, 6 million, and then it still frees him up to move on. But yes, once again, this is where you want it. You want to be 8-3 after today, with players playing for their futures, players playing for their future money and their future careers in the NFL, because a winning Cleveland Browns team is a different prospect to entice players that may be better than them to come here. And it's been mentioned before that players will follow success. Players make money. Every single NFL player that has gone through his first year contract and is into his second year contract, they're all going to make money, so sometimes they follow success, and let's be that team that hoovers up the ring chasers, and let's be one of those teams that can provide rings for players, please. That would be really nice.
Definitely. We want to see the best Browns teams possible. So again, I just want to thank you guys for joining the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show. The Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show is brought to you by Sports Illustrated BrownsDigest. Again, I am a contributing writer along with lead editor Pete Smith and Brandon Little. Be sure to check out the website at www.si.com/NFL/Browns. Also, we do have a live game thread that is available now. We'll have live game commentary and updates throughout the game where you can check out the different information about what's going on. I actually lead that myself with the live game thread, and we're just going to go ahead and continue to get into the show. And again, another thing that's going to be huge that we've already kind of talked about is the battle in the trenches. Do you believe that the Jaguars defensive line can compete with the Browns offensive line?
I think there's very few defensive lines that can compete with this offensive line. I said it earlier on, you guys have had Thanksgiving. We don't celebrate it here in Ireland, but I can tell you when I woke up on Thursday morning, I was thankful for Bill Callahan because he's just been amazing. We've had some how will I say it, unconventional O-line coaches in my time as a Cleveland Browns fan, such as Bob Wiley, who won the hearts of many in Hard Knocks. And then we've had some really good, well-respected coaches with James Campen, who maybe didn't have the tools at his disposal that he needed. But now what we have is we have Jedrick Wills, who's an inspired choice at number 10 last year. We've got the professional in Joe Batonio and JC Tretter. JC Tretter's standing, his intellect, everything about him is he's just a there's players that you need to be proud of, and JC Tretter is certainly one of those. Wyatt Teller this year, where did that come from? Speaks for itself. It's been amazing. And then we've got, and I talk about, remember I spoke about there, the players will come because there's a smell of success. Jack Conklin is one of these guys. Jack Conklin was the start of this for Cleveland Browns. No one thought we could have him. Nobody thought we would get him. No one thought it was possible. We couldn't fit it into our wage structure. Jack Conklin is our right tackle, and he's a damn good one as well. So this is an amazing offensive line. You often hear the Dallas Cowboys offensive line prior to injuries, and even at the start of the year was well lauded and well vaulted. Well, we've got another group that are in town, and they're every bit as coherent. It's no how would I put it? It's no coincidence. Bill Callahan forged that offensive line in Dallas, and he's now on here to repeat his great work again. So Bill Callahan, MVP of the year so far. This offensive line are our best performing group so far this year. Can the Jaguars defensive line compete with it? Maybe with a fit Josh Allen, they might have been able to do so. Without Josh Allen there, I don't know where our pass rush is going to come from. Clevion Chason has been he's been really non-existent. Hopefully that stays the same way this year. And I'm absolutely delighted. It's one of my favorite parts of the Browns team this year. And I think it should be everybody else's as well.
Yeah, I've loved what Bill Callahan has done with this offensive line. Even going back early into the offseason, he actually had an interview where he talked about how much he liked Wyatt Teller as an offensive lineman. And I feel Bill Callahan has been huge in his growth this season. I was expecting more of a competition between him and Drew Forbes. Obviously, Drew Forbes opted out of the season with the whole COVID option. And, hopefully he can come back and provide some depth along the offensive line, because obviously the more good offensive linemen you have is a good thing to have, whether you use them as trade pieces or in a situation someone goes down, like Wyatt Teller with that calf injury. It's always good to have someone that you can trust. Two players that really stick out to me is Wyatt Teller and Jedrick Wills this season. I love the fact that picture has been making rounds of Wyatt Teller blocking three Eagles players when Kareem Hunt jumps into the end zone. That was huge. And really, there's a play, some fans may or may not pay attention to it, but there's a play that Kim Stefanski always likes to rely on, especially in the second half on third or second down, when there's about 3 or 4 yards to go, is he loves to utilize Wyatt Teller as a lead blocker, pulling for either Kareem Hunt or Nick Chubb along the left side of the offensive line, and that play is just dangerous.
He is, I wouldn't like to have been feeding him on Thursday for Thanksgiving, that's for sure. Wyatt Teller, I tell you, he's built like a safe. He's just really sturdy, and I'd say it'd take a hefty food bill to feed him, but he's been fantastic. That trade looks better and better and better every time he takes the field. For what was it, a fourth and a fifth?
I think it was a fifth and a sixth.
It could have been. It was definitely day 3 picks anyway. And look, it speaks for itself. He was the best graded by PFF player, offensive line player throughout the whole in the whole league until last week. And while he didn't even have a particularly bad game, it just wasn't as good as the other games.
Exactly.
And I'll take that. If I'm a player and someone comes off and you come off and you say, yeah, you were maybe a B, but you've been an A plus the other couple of weeks, I'll go, yeah, I'm okay with that. Especially when he came up with such a good play, as you mentioned, to block all those players. But yeah, country strong, great guy. You hear a couple of interviews with him, and you mentioned the Bill Callahan connection. I think Bill Callahan had a lot to do with him in his pre-draft process as well. He got very, very close to him. So these things happen for a reason. These little pieces come into play, and I'm just loving it. And we haven't even talked about people like Chris Hubbard, who everybody would have thought would have been out in his ear at the end of last year. He's come in, he's done a job, he's been a consummate team man, a consummate professional, loved in the locker room, got him on a very healthy deal for the team, much to his own making, because he, once again, probably smelled the success that we were bringing in here, wanted to work with Bill Callahan. We don't got to worry about this at all for another 2 or 3 years, and that is fantastic, because the question is going to come up, and I don't think you have this question here. The Baker Mayfield question is going to come up, and if we are going to see the best out of Baker, we need these guys. He needs to see the same numbers standing in front of him, and he needs to have the same voice in his headset, and that's where the stability of the coaching staff, this offensive line, and the bubble around Baker is going to be really important. I can't wait until the day that we don't have the comparison between him and Deshaun Watson and even him and the rest of these guys, because all the rest of those guys, those quarterbacks have had stability. Little old Baker hasn't, yet he's still put up some very, very decent numbers in comparison with all other quarterbacks in that level. He just hasn't been as good as the Deshaun Watsons, the Patrick Mahomes, and so on, which I think is fine. But really, we're down to the business end of his contract too. Let's see what we can get out of him with this line in front of him.
Oh, definitely. So that's actually a perfect segue into our next topic. So we're just going to take a short commercial break, and we're going to hop into the talk about Baker Mayfield, which is going to be a huge discussion for this week. So looking at the quarterback comparison for this week, obviously you have Baker Mayfield facing off against Mike Glennon. And for me, Baker Mayfield has really just been – he's been a good leader in terms of, keeping everyone concentrated on the goal this season. He's been I feel like he's been a lot more mature when it comes to like just post-game conferences. There were some times over the last few years, especially with Tony Grossi, where, he'll, get physically frustrated or, he wasn't being that marquee franchise quarterback that, teams really want. Obviously it's extremely rough, from an organizational standpoint, from a player standpoint, and even from the fans, where, your starting quarterback has 1 billion Progressive insurance commercials, but the Browns weren't really winning any games. But it's a lot different now. They're winning games. They have a winning record. They're in a playoff hunt, all those things. But a lot of those accolades, thus far hasn't really been because of Baker Mayfield. I feel like the offensive line, which has been great. The number 1 rated offensive line in the league. You look at Bill Callahan, what he's done. Head coach Kevin Stefanski is instrumental in all this success because, one, his dedication to running the ball when you have a running back duo of Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, and they've done that with plenty of success. And really, you only look at Baker Mayfield of, can you make a few throws here and there? We're not going to expect you to throw the ball 30-plus times. Plus, the weather hasn't allowed you to throw the ball 30-plus times over the last pretty much 3 weeks. And really, you've only seen success from him throwing the ball since the Bengals game is from play action. do you think that Baker Mayfield can put up enough points to win this game? And not even just this game, but enough to potentially win a playoff game or to win a game to get into the playoffs?
I cite throughout the whole lot of this year, I've been having this conversation an awful lot, mostly off social media, because I feel when you have this conversation it's not on social media, it's a lot more truthful. But Baker Mayfield, for me, if we get Ryan Tannehill from the last 5 games of last year from Baker Mayfield, a good game manager who every so often can fire it around the park like he did against the Bengals, like I'm fully expecting him to do it today against the Giants, against the Jets. I'm expecting him to literally light those up, and I think he should. I think he's those games earmarked. But the big thing is, when I look at Baker Mayfield, and as I mentioned, stability is a huge thing for him. I think he's been. We've looked at events in his life, in his Cleveland Browns life, we call it, and we've said, "Oh, that's going to humble Baker Mayfield. That's going to humble him. That's going to humble him." Singular events aren't going to humble him, because if they did, he wouldn't have grabbed his crotch against, for Oklahoma. He wouldn't have planted the flag. He's a fiery guy, and that is fantastic. This whole season, I think, is going to humble him from the point of view that he sees that he doesn't need to do what he did in college for a team to win. And also, I think that it's very important to look at Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield's being asked to do something completely different than he's done in his career as well this year, because he has basically, the two of the best running backs, a running back tag team partnership behind him. So he knows that if things aren't going good and that call comes in, he's got to do it. He's not going to overrule that call, because he knows these guys are brilliant behind him. So the trust factor is there. And the third piece, which I think is very, very underrated, is I like the cut of Alex Van Pelt's jib. I think he's a hard ass. Excuse my language, but I think he is. I think maybe that he's gotten the ear of Baker, and I think Baker might trust him. You could see that Baker didn't really click with Freddie Kitchens last year. People said it was a holiday camp for him. Maybe it was. I don't know. Obviously, I'm here in Ireland. I don't know. But Alex Van Pelt looks like he takes no prisoners, and the fact that he's gotten a tune out of Andy Dalton at times, and especially out of Aaron Rodgers. I think that he absolutely can help Baker, and a lot of work has gone into his footwork. I'm not really worried, because as I say, in the previous years, Baker's put up a lot of yards and a lot of interceptions. This year, his yards are down, his interceptions are down too. And I think he needs to learn how to manage the game as well and be both types of players, not just the highlight reel guy, but he also needs to be the guy who needs to screw his head on when the going gets tough too. And we're seeing that Baker this year. We're winning with him as opposed to in spite of him, and that's very important.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I noticed as well when I was just looking at his season so far. Is he hasn't thrown for really over 200 yards, too much this season. I mean, last week he did have 204, really due to the ability of Kadero Hodge to get open off of play action. But, like you said, he hasn't thrown a touchdown in the last 3 matchups. But on the same token, he hasn't thrown an interception, and that's been huge for this offense. Because when you're able to, control the clock with running the ball and not turn the ball over, that is a formula for success on offense. Obviously every drive you have isn't going to be a touchdown. Even the Kansas City Chiefs, they don't score sometimes. So, they're arguably one of the best offenses in football. Yeah. And when you look at their ability to, play with success, Baker Mayfield really just has to make the big play at the right time. Every throw doesn't have to be a home run ball. Every ball doesn't have to be that, that strong arm laser that he loves to throw. One of the things I just want to see him to continue to progress on this season and heading into next season as well is really his touch. I feel like that's something that's been too inconsistent for his game throughout his career, is that he likes to throw that fastball a lot. But when you look at, Drew Brees, or you look at Russell Wilson, smaller quarterbacks that have had success in the NFL, that they're able to put touch on the ball. Whether that's getting it over a linebacker or even just a cornerback that's right there, but just being able to get it over their arm can make the difference between something being an interception, and it not being one. Obviously they're playing in Florida, so weather shouldn't be too much of an issue. Likely going to be a sunny game down there in Florida. So, this is, good throwing the ball weather. You haven't really got that in Cleveland. So, there's really no excuse for you not to find some ability to throw the ball with success. And also with Mayfield, I just hope that as his confidence begins to grow, that he's not just a quarterback that has big games against lesser competition, but actually steps up in games that matter. At the end of the day, people may not want to hear this, but I could care less if he throws for 4 touchdowns and 300 yards today. If you have another dud against the Titans, Ravens, and Steelers, it's all for naught, because a franchise quarterback is someone that you can trust in big moments and in big games. Obviously this is a big game because the playoff hopes for the Browns are basically at the wheel of the team right now. But on the same token, your franchise quarterback is in question of, do you take that 5th-year option? And, how can you give someone a contract extension if you never step up in big games?
Exactly. And we go back to the I suppose the fact that the salary cap is in flux at the moment. It's a very fluid situation. There's and JC Tretter's going to have a job in his hands after this year and after next year, and however long. I suppose that the COVID relief package is going to need to be in place for the NFL, because that salary cap is an unknown really at the moment, and until we know it, Baker Mayfield's needs to protect his future too. But I think, as I say, you made a great point there as well. We in Cleveland, and I'm not even in Cleveland. You know what I mean. You know what I mean. Us Browns fans, we I don't think anybody this year is stopping at playoffs. We're expecting to get into the playoffs and win that playoff match and see how far we can go. There's a confidence. It's not a cockiness, it's a confidence. And this comes back to Baker being humbled. Baker has had a cockiness before. I want him to be confident, but not cocky. And the only way he'll do that is when he knows that he can put other people in front of him. That breeds confidence. Cockiness is when you need to do it yourself. Confidence is when you know that you can hand it over to somebody and still come out of it looking good yourself. And I think that's the nice Baker that we have. Another good thing that we could see is that that if the fact that we have Kareem Hunt locked up, if we can get a nice deal for Nick Chubb, that's another conversation for a whole different day. But maybe that kind of situation allows us to maybe sign Baker on a cheaper deal. Maybe he sees the wood from the trees, he likes where he is, and so on. He's not like, if we don't sign him, are a lot of teams going to take another chance on him? Like, he doesn't have the best media reputation at the moment.
Right.
Our team's looking at him and saying, like, it's not like Dak Prescott where people are looking at him going, yeah, I'll take him. Are a lot of teams going to look at Baker Mayfield and go, yeah, I'll take him? Remember, he's an undersized quarterback. I want him to sign. I just want to get that in there first, actually, before I go in this. But a lot of other teams, he may not fit where they're going. People may not want him. They may not want to bring the transgressions we've seen from him. So he has a lot of thinking to do himself, as do the team with regards to his 5th-year option.
Yeah, it's definitely tough to, have a quarterback that is very brash in nature to, lead the franchise. But like you said, this has been a humbling season for him. And I feel like you can't say it any better, is that they've won with him rather than because of him. Mm-hmm. And that's big one just for this Browns offense and for them to find success. But, at the end of the day, the quarterback is still the most important position in the NFL, and it will continue to be the most important position in all of sports. So you look at the Jacksonville Jaguars and who they have at quarterback, and you got the Statue of Liberty of Mike Glennon, a guy that I'm still surprised is in the league, truth be told. But, you can never go wrong with the veteran backup that can give you serviceable, minutes if your starter does go down. But what type of performance do you think they'll get out of Mike Glennon after not starting for 3 years?
Mike Glennon can throw the ball long, and I think that's what we're going to see. I think we're going to see him. He's going to try and heave it down the field. They're going to try and set up the run with James Robinson very much so. I think we'll see as much of a play action kind of situation in boots from Glennon as you can get, as you say, because he isn't the most mobile, but as much as you can get from him. And I think he's going to try and heave a couple down the field early. He's very much in there to try and manage the game. Jake Luton maybe lost his head last week against the Steelers. He lost his composure, and maybe they said they bring in somebody who's basically taking his licks in the NFL, and he certainly has. But I think very much so that he's not going to dictate the game to the Browns. I think that the Browns' defensive line is going to dictate the game to him, and he's very much going to. We're going to see if he can take what he's given. With his offensive core of wide receivers very much depleted, I'm not quite sure. I think what they will probably do is they will rely on the ball over the middle. Tyler Eifert, try and get him in there as much as he can. I think we'll see Chris Thompson out of the backfield a good bit, maybe taking passes in the flat. I think that's what they'll rely on. But I'm not expecting Mike Glennon to go out there and throw for 400 yards, 3 touchdowns. I'm not expecting it. But like that and everything else, you got to respect the guy who's hung around in the league. So I just hope we can crack him one or two, a couple early, maybe get him a bit sore around the ribs and get him to think twice about hanging onto the ball too long in the pocket.
Yeah, watching Mike Glennon from his time with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Chicago Bears, he's definitely been a player that's shown an ability to turn the ball over. You look at Carson Wentz last week, obviously was turning the ball over. And the Browns' defense really has been at its best when it's forcing turnovers. And Glennon throughout his career has shown ability to, throw an interception or two. And I believe that result will likely be the same. I find it very unlikely that the Browns will leave this game without causing some type of interception or at least some type of turnover of a fumble or something. Glennon hasn't started in 3 years. Now, does that negate his ability as a quarterback to make the right play? No. But on the same token, the speed of the NFL, obviously gets faster as players get younger and you get older. So, like you said, he's not very mobile, and that's definitely an issue when you're not a player that can move around the pocket in the modern NFL, because a lot of teams do have, good schemes where they can generate pressure to get after the quarterback. And that's just going to be really important for the Browns to generate pressure to get after Mike Glennon. And if they're able to do that, the turnover should be start and begin to roll and really get this defense going.
Absolutely. And look, Olivia Vernon, once again, he could be padding stats, I think, today with regards to sacks, half sacks, pressures, hurries, all that kind of stuff today. And after what he did last week, he must be licking his chops at getting his hands on Mike Glennon too.
Definitely. So we're actually going to move into our matchups to watch for the game. For me, my matchup to watch this week will actually be Tyler Eifert versus the Browns linebackers. You look at the fact that the Browns linebackers have allowed 3 touchdowns to the tight end group in the last 2 games. Tyler Eifert a player that was formerly with the Cincinnati Bengals when he was healthy and Dalton was playing his best. He was a tight end that gave the Browns some trouble. And just overall, the Browns linebackers hasn't been the strongest group of this defense. So, if they do score on offense, I believe it'll likely come from that tight end position. So you look at B.J. Goodson, most likely Malcolm Smith and Mack Wilson. Can they cover Tyler Eifert, in space, on a consistent basis? Obviously he's no longer in his prime like he was when he was with Cincinnati because of all those back injuries. But he's always been a player that has been good in the intermediate parts in the middle of the field. I definitely still believe he can make some plays down the seam. And again, just because tight ends have always been that position group that has given the Browns trouble. So hopefully, B.J. Goodson can step up and have himself a big game.
Yeah, definitely. Like we mentioned him earlier on, Tyler Eifert, I think he had 13 touchdown catches one season before. Yeah, he's been very productive as a tight end, especially, as we mentioned, but 2 bad leg injuries have left him a bit compromised. You would have thought that if anybody was going to take a chance on him to sign him, it would have been the Bengals, but he's gone to Jacksonville and he's got 1 touchdown so far. But it's very much so, yeah, who's going to cover him? And it goes right back, I think, to our very first question of, are we going to see Andrew Sandeo go in there? Are we going to see somebody get in there and try and get close to him, or Ronnie Harrison and so on? He doesn't have lightning pace, but he's very much a mismatch. He gets up, he high points the ball. He's strong. He's a big guy, and he's got hands like glue as well. So if we can kind of put him off his stride, and I think he will be the safety blanket, obviously, for Mike Glennon. If we can put him off his stride, I think that's where the Browns are really going to have to focus, especially early in the game, for any thrown balls, for sure.
Definitely. And what would you say is your matchup to watch for this week?
Conversely, I think our matchup to watch is our tight ends against their linebackers. Obviously, the familiar face of Joe Schobert is in there and Miles Jack, and I think we're going to go for them. Joe Schobert hasn't been having a very good season in coverage, which is startling because that's where he was brilliant for the Browns essentially, and he was missing tackles. He missed tackles for the Browns. It's almost flipped for that in Jacksonville, and I'm really looking forward to seeing Austin Hooper, Bryant coming in there, and David Njoku. And I think we could run roughshod over the middle there as well with those guys, because they're going to expect us to be going down the seams an awful lot with the rookie cornerbacks, the 3-4 rookie cornerbacks that are out there. I think they're going to expect us to go wide to the perimeter, and yes, we will do. But I think we're going to see tons of crossing plays. I think we're going to see, a lot of Jarvis Landry, a lot of the tight ends getting in there. We're going to be playing, I would imagine we're going to play 3 tight ends a bit in this game as well. Keep them guessing, especially with their young cornerbacks. And whether it's a run play or not, we do have the running backs that are there. So the 3 tight ends allows you to disguise that. But I think we're going to march our way down the field using our tight ends and Jarvis Landry. And I'm all for it. That's what I'm here for, because I love that type of football. While the 60, 70-yard bombs are great, you can't do it every time. And what will win you a playoff game is being able to march it down the field and being good over the middle. Tom Brady has won 6 rings out of it. Out of hitting Julian Edelman and guys like Hogan over the middle, for those money plays to move the chains. And I think the Browns are going to do that today. And I think we're going to see an awful lot of the play from our tight ends against their linebackers as well.
Definitely. So that's actually, again, another perfect segue into our final segment of the show, which is the 3 keys to winning the game. And actually, one of my keys is for the tight ends to be consistently blocking on the second level this week. Obviously, the Browns are a run-first team, and believably so with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. And when you allow your tight ends to get to the second level to be blocking linebackers, that opens up bigger running lanes. You look at Kareem Hunt, who's leading the NFL in yards of 10 or 10 plus or more yards in the NFL. And then you look at Nick Chubb, even while being out for 6 games, he still is one of the top leaders in the NFL of runs of 20 plus or more. In the last 2 games, he's had runs over 50 yards, which has been huge. I love the stiff arm that he had against the Philadelphia Eagles right before Kareem Hunt was able to hurdle that defender into the end zone. That was huge. So, the tight ends overall, you look at Austin Hooper, who has been the highest graded run blocking tight end of that group. And then Harrison Bryant has only been getting better, which has been huge. It sucks to say that, David Njoku probably won't be with the team for much longer, just given, his performance with the team being a first-round pick. But, as long as they continue to grow in that run blocking with this offensive scheme that they have, it's going to be very tough for pretty much any team to contend with this run game of the Browns.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of this. And that's going back again to our chat about Baker Mayfield. That's why he isn't being forced to put up those yards, because this run game is just fantastic. Our tight ends are there for a reason. We have a head coach. It's all coming into place with Bill Callahan. It's like as if our general manager actually had a plan going into the season. That's different because that's very different. I don't need to go into that.
So what's your first key for winning the game this week?
My first key for winning the game is to see somebody stand up in the rush game, in the pass rush game, to really knock the stuffing out of this offense. And as I say, it's not a massive offense from a standpoint of production, but you want to kind of kick it while it's down. You want to kind of make it play with one hand tied behind its back. And to do that is to force them to run the ball. Be in a position where you're getting so much pressure on Mike Glennon. If we had Myles Garrett here, I would be making a prediction that they're going to go through 3 quarterbacks in this game. That he would absolutely massacre this team. At the moment, we don't, and we're going to need to see who's going to step up and be that pass rush threat. So that's really my key to winning this game. How do we kind of make their attack less potent early on, and I mean very early on within the first quarter? How do we get them seeing shadows? How do we force them to go to the run game predominantly throughout? That's really my first key to winning the game.
Okay, and that's actually really closely related to my second key of winning this game is defensive coordinator Joe Woods creating consistent design pressure.
Mhm.
Obviously the Browns are missing two starters along that defensive line, so you're hoping that they can get some pressure, whether it be from the linebackers, something you really haven't seen much of, just because, again, I believe the coaching staff's lack of belief in the linebackers to consistently make plays, just because of the talent that they have in that group. So, you look for players blitzing out of the slot or safeties blitzing, which they found some success with. So, or even if it's just stunting players along the defensive line, just finding different ways to generate pressure off of design plays will definitely help with getting after the quarterback if they're not able to do so with just their natural front for a rush. And also, this is a good game for Joe Woods to find out what works. So that way, once you do get Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward back, you still can run those plays, obviously, hopefully with higher success when you get your star players back.
Yeah. My second key to winning the game is something that we've already talked about as well. It's highlighting or focusing or getting a focus of our passing attack, making sure that we actually have a focus of our passing attack. As I said, I've no problem getting out to an early lead and try to force feed somebody for the game. Try and make sure that we make a star out of one of our wide receivers, build that confidence, get things going. And that's going to be a key to the game for me, is to get out there early, get a lead early so that we can dictate what we want to do and start using our wide receivers a small bit more. So that's going to be my second key to the game.
Definitely. And then my final key for this week is just going to be to take the competition seriously. The Jacksonville Jaguars has been a team that have maybe been underlooked by a few teams. And again, like their best matchup, I'll probably say, was against the Green Bay Packers, where the Packers won a very close game against Jacksonville. And situations like this, obviously, the team, they're really playing for draft position. So, obviously them winning this game isn't, most ideal for them in their franchise and what they want to do in the near future. But on the same token, if you're able to get a win against the Browns, again, a team that's right in the thick of the playoff hunt, it's going to be big for some stock on the Jaguars, whether it be on their defense or their offense, of some players stepping up and potentially, playing their way into the long-term, future of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And for the Browns, they've been this team before of, we're not going to take them seriously because just, look at what they're doing. They're not very talented on either side of the football. And now you're in a situation of where you're the quote unquote bully, and you actually show that you can be a top-notch team. This shouldn't necessarily be a game where it's close, because the Browns are really trying to continue to establish that winning culture and that winning identity. And true playoff teams, when they go against lesser competition later in the season, that's when they really dominate. And you could definitely use that momentum going into the next two games against Baltimore and Tennessee.
Absolutely, 100%. My last key to winning in this game is it's going to be basically, I've gone offense, defense, and now I'm going to go special teams. We haven't showed up in special teams, and it's not even that we've given away massive plays in special teams, but we've just not been consistent. We've not been focused. Mike Prefer can't be happy with it, and I know he isn't happy with it because he's spoken about it. But I want to see our special teams. We talked about trap game, but even games like this where we're expected to win, don't give up anything stupid in special teams, because anything can happen there. They're going to be playing with maybe guys that the Browns aren't familiar with in special teams because they're so depleted, and just don't do anything stupid there, because it's very demoralizing for a team when you give away a free hit or a free score, or give them a free hit from a special teams blunder. It's imperative that we don't do that, and our special teams are really going to need to up their game, because, well, as you mentioned, we are the bully now. We're expected to be the bully, should I say, in this situation. When we get to the playoffs, we won't be, and we're going to need our special teams to come up trumps, because we've seen it throughout. Look, the days of Darren Sproles and all those guys that were decent returners, Josh Cribbs. We need to come up with something. I'm not even saying that we need to take it back for touchdowns, but we need to get good coverage from their kicks and be a bit better from when we're returning kicks too. So I'm really expecting a good game, a big game, and I think we need it in this game as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Hopefully they can get something out of Donovan Peoples-Jones or Dearness Johnson. I feel like since JoJo Natson went out so early in the season, the kickoff return unit has. I mean, they've been underwhelming. I mean, I feel like the easiest way to put it. So hopefully they can get something going. So lastly, your score prediction for this week. Do you see the Jaguars pulling an upset?
No, I see 31-14 to the Browns.
Okay, 31-14. That's pretty close to what I have. I have the Browns at 28-7. I really don't believe that the Jaguars should put up too many points. Unless the Browns defense has some miscues, even with them missing some players. Just you have already depleted defense, and they're missing so many weapons on their offense. This is a good opportunity for the Browns to really have a measuring stick of their depth on the roster. So hope this is the week that we can get that offensive passing game on track, and we'll see. So I will love. I thank you so much for joining me on the Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show, Neil. Would you like to tell the viewers pretty much any upcoming work that you have, about your podcast, things just like that before we go?
Yeah, as I say, thanks so much for having me on. It's been brilliant. The time has absolutely flown by. But yeah, you can find me on @2GreenBrowns on Twitter. And you can find our podcast at Cle Sports Pod. So it's Cleveland Sports Collective, where you'll hear myself and you hear my co-host John Cahill. And also we've got Tom Moore and Josh Brickner as well, who do the post-game shows on the Cleveland Sports Collective. And we've also got Chase Richardson, who talks about the Buckeyes from time to time as well. But yeah, you can give us a follow there if you like as well. And we've 24 minutes till kickoff, and I am really excited for this game, and I can't wait for it. And thank you so much for allowing me to come on.
Thank you for coming on, Neil. Really appreciate it. I hope you guys can check out the Browns game again. Kickoff is today at 1:00, as they'll be heading down, or they're already in Florida, as they're on the road against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Be sure to tune in. Most likely going to be on CBS as well. And we will see you guys next week. And thank you for tuning in to Cleveland Browns Tailgate Show, and go Browns.